shelves and manage difficult situations. IT and telecom workers are making sure that our networks are functioning well as more and more Canadians work from home. Truckers, rail workers, air cargo workers, and postal workers are working to make sure that we have the essential goods that we need. At food banks and at shelters, workers are facing growing uncertainty with dedication and with a sense of duty. There are countless others who, in these difficult times, have showed immense patience and determination in making sure that Canadians have the goods and services that they need. So I want to thank all of you for all that you're doing. The health and safety of Canadians is our government's top priority. We continue to urge Canadians to stay home and to follow the advice from medical professionals and from public health officials. Please take all necessary precautions to protect your health. It's not just about you. It's about your neighbors. It's about your colleagues. It's about your family members. La santé et la sécurité des Canadiens et des Canadiennes sont la priorité absolue de notre gouvernement. Nous continuons d'insister pour que tous les Canadiens qui peuvent rester à la maison le fassent et pour que tous suivent les conseils des professionnels de la santé et des responsables de la santé publique. S'il vous plaît, prenez toutes les précautions nécessaires pour protéger votre santé.
Please take all the necessary precautions to protect your health. It's not only about you, it's about your neighbors and your colleagues and the members of your family.
We all have a role to play to flatten the curve and to protect those who are most vulnerable. We have to look out for each other. That's what Canadians do. We need that Canadian spirit now, more than ever. COVID-19 is having a significant impact on our economy, an impact that continues to evolve. At this stage, the full breadth and the scope of the impact remain unknown. I want to acknowledge the Prime Minister's leadership. This is a challenge like none that we've ever faced before. Facing up to it demands swift and decisive action. A coordinated approach is absolutely necessary at this time. I'm in contact with provincial and territorial partners, with the private sector, and with my colleagues, other finance ministers from around the world. I've also been working very closely with federal colleagues, including Governor Polas from the Bank of Canada, who's here with me today. Together, we're working hard to mitigate the impacts of COVID-19 on the Canadian and on the global economy. Clearly, the impacts of this pandemic have been profound and will continue to be profound. Households and businesses are already feeling the effects. Our government is prepared to do whatever it takes to keep our economy strong and stable, whatever it takes. I want to address something off the top. Usually my job is to ensure that we maintain our fiscal track. But right now, as Minister of Finance, my only job is to make sure that Canadians can keep food in the fridge, that they can keep a roof over their heads, that they can afford the medicine that they need. As you've heard me say many times before, we've entered this challenge in a very strong fiscal position. Canada's balance sheet is the envy of the world, and it means we have the fiscal firepower to respond. We're now prepared to use it. COVID-19 is an extraordinary challenge that requires an extraordinary investment. Today, we're announcing the first phase of Canada's COVID-19 economic response plan. We'll provide $27 billion of direct support to people and businesses, which is more than 1% of our GDP. On top of this, we'll defer $55 billion in tax revenue, leaving that money in the economy. For the economists listening, that's 3% of GDP that would not be in the economy without these actions. For all Canadians, this means we're doing whatever it takes to support you and your family as we contain this virus. Aujourd'hui, nous annonçons la première phase de notre plan d'intervention économique du Canada pour répondre à la COVID-19. Nous fournirons 27 milliards de dollars de soutien direct aux individus et aux entreprises, ce qui représente plus de 1% de PIB.
which represents more than
De
1%
plus,
of
nous
GDP.
reporterons
Furthermore,
55 milliards de
we
dollars
will
de
be
recettes fiscales,
providing
laissant cet argent
$55 billion
dans l'économie.
and injecting that money into the economy.
Cela représente 3%
For the
de
economy,
PIB
that
qui
represents
ne serait pas
3%
dans
of the
l'économie dans ces
GDP
actions.
that will be in action. For Canadians, it means that we are doing everything necessary to support you
Le virus.
as the virus
We're
continues.
working quickly to get money into people's hands so that no matter what happens during this period, they can afford the essentials. And we're working to make sure that no one gets left behind. First and foremost, we know that people are worried about their health. So if you're needing to quarantine or to self-isolate or care for a loved one who's sick, you can get around $450 per week, even if you don't qualify for employment insurance. The new, what we're calling emergency care benefit, will provide self-employed Canadians, contractors, freelancers, part-time workers, gig economy workers, many of our cultural workers and more, with income security if they can't work because they're in self-isolation or in quarantine or taking care of a loved one. This benefit will provide income support of $900 every 2 weeks for up to 15 weeks. La nouvelle allocation de soins d'urgence offrira
The
aux
new
travailleurs
emergency
autonomes
care
canadiens,
benefit
aux
will allow
entrepreneurs, aux pigistes,
self-employed
aux travailleurs à
workers,
temps partiel,
entrepreneurs,
à bon
part-time
nombre de nos
workers,
travailleurs culturels et plus
cultural
encore,
workers,
une sécurité de revenus s'ils
and
ne peuvent
others.
pas travailler parce qu'ils
Income
sont
security if
en
they cannot
isolement
work
ou en
because
quarantaine.
they are in quarantine or isolation, or because they're caring for a member of their family. This will provide some $900 every 2 weeks for a period of 15 weeks.
Who are unable to work because schools and daycares are closed, or if you need to take care of a sick family member, you'll also qualify for the emergency care benefit. Canadians can apply online at home, allowing them to follow public health guidelines, and they can receive payment via direct deposit. It will require a simple attestation that will not require medical documentation. We want this to be as easy as possible so that people who need this help can get this help. The benefit will be available starting in early April. This is about saving lives. No Canadian will have to worry about protecting their health and putting food on the table. This new measure builds on the announcement the Prime Minister made last week that we're waiving the 1-week waiting period to access the employment insurance sickness benefits for people who are sick or in quarantine. We also know that people are worried about struggling to pay the bills if they lose their jobs or see their hours reduced. We want you to know that we have your back. For any worker who loses their job and does not qualify for employment insurance, we'll be introducing a new benefit, the Emergency Support Benefit, for which we've set aside $5 billion. More details will come in the near future, but you can rest assured that the federal government will provide you with 14 weeks of support at a comparable level to the employment insurance program. There are also over 12 million Canadian families with low and modest incomes who will need extra financial support at this time. The government will provide a GST credit averaging close to $400 for single adults and $600 for couples to see you through. And to help families keep their kids well fed and provided for, the government will issue a special Canada Child Benefit top-up of $300 per child. For a single parent with 2 children earning minimum wage, these two measures combined will mean around $1,500 of special support. Pour tout travailleur qui perd son emploi et qui n'est pas admissible à l'assurance d'emploi, nous allons introduire une nouvelle allocation, l'allocation de soutien d'urgence, pour laquelle nous avons réservé $5 milliards. Plus de détails viendront dans un avenir rapproché, mais vous pouvez être assuré que le gouvernement fédéral vous donnera donnera
will
14 semaines de soutien
provide 14
à un
weeks
niveau
of support
comparable à
at a
l'assurance.
comparable level to employment
Plus
insurance.
de 12 millions de
Over
familles
12
canadiennes à
million
revenus faibles et modestes
low and
auront
modest
besoin
income
d'un
families
soutien
in
financier
Canada need
supplémentaire.
financial support.
Le gouvernement accordera un crédit
The government
pour le
will
TPS
thus
d'une moyenne
provide
près de
a
$400
GST
pour les
top-up
adultes
of
seuls,
some
près de
$400
$600
for lone
pour
adults
les
and close to $600
aider
for
les
couples,
familles à s'occuper
and
de
to
leurs
help
enfants et de bien
families
les
look
nourrir.
after their
Le
children.
gouvernement
The
émettra un
government
supplément spécial de
will
l'allocation canadienne
provide
pour enfants
a Canada
de
Child Benefit
$300
top-up of
par
some
enfant.
$300 per
Pour un parent
child.
seul avec deux
For a
enfants
lone parent with
qui
2
gagne le
children
salaire
who
minimum,
earns
ces
minimum
deux
wage,
mesures combinées
these two
représenteront
combined measures
environ
will represent some
$1,500
$1,500 of support.
We know seniors are worried too. First and foremost, please take care of your health. Practice social distancing and make sure you're listening to medical advice. We also know you're concerned about the impact of recent market volatility on your retirement funds. We will help you protect the value of your retirement fund by temporarily reducing the minimum withdrawal on registered retirement income funds by 25%. We'll continue to monitor this issue as markets evolve. And I want to assure you that your OAS and GIS payments will continue as usual, without any interruption. Many young Canadians who are starting out in their careers are worried about what this uncertainty will mean to their finances. We're putting in place a 6-month interest-free moratorium on Canada student loan paybacks. This means nearly 1 million Canadians will have an extra $160 a month during this period. We know that Indigenous communities face a greater risk of financial insecurity, so we're creating a distinctions-based Indigenous Community Support Fund. It's crucial that we support our most vulnerable at this time. And that, of course, has to include shelters. Shelters across the country will need the tools to prevent outbreaks. So we'll invest over $200 million to support the homeless through homeless shelters, sexual assault centers, and shelters for women and children to help with the purchase of necessary equipment to implement the best medical advice for keeping people safe and healthy. Partout au pays, les refuges auront besoin
Across the
d'outils
country,
pour prévenir les
shelters
épidémies.
will need resources to prevent outbreaks. We will invest close to $200 million to support shelters for the homeless, sexual assault centers, and halfway homes and transition homes for women and children so that they can do everything that they can to put in place the best medical advice to ensure the health and safety of Canadians.
We need businesses to keep going so that they can keep employees on staff. I know many small and medium-sized businesses and organizations are very concerned about their ability to keep paying their workers. For small employers, we will provide a 10% wage subsidy for the next 3 months, up to $25,000 per employer. This is effective immediately and will help keep Canadians employed. Je sais que de nombreuses petites et moyennes entreprises
I know that many small and medium-sized businesses are very concerned about their ability to continue to pay their workers. For small businesses and organizations, we will provide a wage subsidy of 10% for the next 3 months, up to an amount of $25,000 per employer. This will come into force immediately, and this will help keep Canadians at work.
This builds on steps taken last week to enhance the work sharing program, which will help workers facing reduced hours to get by and help businesses and employers in these difficult times. We also announced Business Credit Availability Program, which will provide $10 billion in credit support through the Business Development Bank of Canada and Export Development Canada to help businesses and organizations get the financing that they need to keep operating and to keep their employees on. We're prepared to provide additional financial support as necessary. On Friday, the Office of the Superintendent of Financial Institutions took action to free up $300 billion in lending capacity. The Bank of Canada, the Governor of the Bank of Canada, also announced a rate cut of 50 basis points to stabilize our economy. We know that businesses in some sectors are more affected than others, like air transportation in the oil and gas sector, and we know that they will need specific help. EDC and BDC are currently developing a tailored set of tools for them and for other affected sectors. At the same time, the federal government will begin working with the government of Alberta on support for workers in the oil and gas sector. We'll make a significant investment in orphan well remediation to help both companies and workers in the province. And we'll be ready to make an announcement on this in the coming days. Canadians are also worried, of course, about bills that are coming due. On Monday, the Canada Mortgage Housing Corporation reinstated the Insured Mortgage Protection Program. Through this program, the corporation will offer $50 billion so that banks and mortgage lenders can offer Canadians payment deferrals, special payment arrangements, or other options to assist homeowners through this time. Compounded with other liquidity tools that we've mentioned, this will mean that there's now $500 billion in credit available to Canadian businesses and households. I've also been talking to the heads of Canada's largest banks, and they've committed to me that they will work with individuals and with businesses on a case-by-case basis to provide additional flexibility in the face of hardships. As a first step, this support will include up to a 6-month deferral program for mortgages and specific opportunities for relief on other credit products, like skip a payment on auto loans or on credit cards. Our banks have a long history of standing by Canadians through challenging times. I encourage Canadians to contact your bank directly to discuss your situation and to get the help that you need. J'ai également parlé aux dirigeants des grandes banques
I've also been
canadiennes.
speaking with the heads of major Canadian banks and have encouraged them to work with businesses and individuals to find practical solutions given this context. First, this support will allow for a 6-month deferral for mortgage loans and the possibility of easing credit. Our banks have always supported Canadians throughout difficult times, and I would encourage Canadians to communicate directly with their banks to discuss their situations and to obtain the support that you need.
Personal income taxes and Canadian businesses who owe corporate income tax now only need to pay it before September 1st. This frees up $55 billion in temporary tax relief, and it keeps that money circulating in our economy. We know this is a time when individuals and businesses need to have money at hand. And also, given the extraordinary times, we've extended the tax filing deadline until June 1st. Les Canadiens qui doivent payer de l'impôt
Canadians who
sur le
must pay
revenu des
taxes
particuliers et les
on
entreprises
personal
canadiennes
income
qui doivent
and
de
Canadian
l'impôt sur le revenu
corporations
des
who
sociétés
that owe
le
corporate
payer avant
income will not have to pay until September 1st. That frees up $55 million of tax relief and allows this money to circulate freely in our economy. We know that this is a time when individuals and businesses need readily available money. Furthermore, given these extraordinary times, we have extended the deadline for filing tax returns until June 1st.
with Labour and other leaders across Canada. On Monday, I spoke to all of the CEOs of our major grocery stores. They've told me that their supply chains are still working well, and they've committed to me that during this crisis, they will maintain fair prices for their customers. As a reminder to Canadians, when you're out shopping, please make sure that you're leaving goods on the shelves for your neighbors who might be waiting for a check to come before they can buy the things that they need. We all need to pull together and to do our part during this time. And I want to say that this work is just beginning. As your Minister of Finance, I will do whatever it takes. In order to follow through on these commitments, we'll be tabling emergency legislation to provide timely support to Canadians, as well as to ensure that we have all the tools to support them and businesses as things continue to evolve during these very uncertain times. It's our collective responsibility to ensure we continue to have the tools to respond quickly as things evolve. These tools will be essential to give Canadians the certainty that their government can rapidly implement measures to protect them and to protect our economy. I'm calling on all parties and the Senate to work with us and to support this legislation. There can be no delay. But I also want to say that I'm confident that all parliamentarians will rise to this occasion. Canadians are counting on us. I want to turn it over now to Governor Polas for a moment before I make some closing remarks.
Well, thank you, Minister. Bonjour tout le monde.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Canadians expect their policymakers to do what it takes to support them in this difficult period. The circumstances that we face today require all hands on deck. Each institution is acting within its respective mandate to deliver a powerful confidence-boosting package of measures for consumers, business, and financial markets. For its part, the Bank of Canada has been working hard to ensure that the financial system has sufficient liquidity so that credit continues to be available to businesses and to households. To recap briefly, on Monday, the bank adjusted its liquidity operations to maintain market functioning and credit availability. The bank has broadened eligible collateral for its term repo facility to help maintain funding conditions by providing a backstop to regular private funding. These will complement the reduction in bank capital buffers announced last week by the Office of the Superintendent of Financial Institutions. All of these actions will support lending by banks to consumers and companies. The bank is also providing extra support to the Canada mortgage bond market so that this important funding market continues to function well. The first purchase under this new program took place only yesterday. To help the economy cope with the negative shocks of COVID-19 and the recent sharp drop in oil prices, the bank has reduced its benchmark interest rate by 100 basis points in two steps. The first was on March 4th, second time just this past Friday. Our benchmark interest rate now stands at 0.75%. The bank has also broadened the scope of the Government of Canada bond buyback program, added new term repo operations, and introduced a new banker's acceptance purchase facility that starts next Monday, March the 23rd. In the days to come, the bank will launch its new standing term liquidity facility. This new funding mechanism is focused on individual financial institutions rather than on the market as a whole. It's intended to give an eligible institution that is viable but facing a sudden stress to its liquidity access to central bank liquidity on terms that are known in advance. The Governing Council hopes that institutions facing liquidity issues will make use of this new facility. Canadian banks also conduct parts of their business in U.S. dollars. And on the weekend, the Bank of Canada joined with its counterparts in the UK, Japan, Europe, the U.S., and Switzerland on a coordinated action to provide liquidity via standing U.S. dollar liquidity swap line arrangements. La Banque du Canada mène des actions
The Bank of
concertées
Canada
pour
is
soutenir
undertaking
l'économie canadienne.
concerted actions to support the Canadian economy in this time of economic stress. We have introduced these new measures, and we are monitoring how the markets are improving. We are also closely monitoring market trends, and we are prepared to provide all the liquidity that the financial system requires so that it can continue to serve Canadians.
Concerted action to support the Canadian economy during this period of economic stress. We've introduced these new measures, and we're watching how market performance improves. We're closely monitoring market developments, and we stand ready to provide all the liquidity the financial system needs so that it can continue to serve Canadians. Minister, back to you.
Well, thank you. Earlier, I noted that many of the heroes of this situation, the people providing medical care we need, food to eat, working phones and internet, clean spaces, let's make sure that we give them the support that they need. Journalists are also doing extraordinary work to keep Canadians informed in this rapidly changing situation. I do want to note the work of Governor Polas, my colleagues, especially the Prime Minister, who's reacted to this unprecedented situation with strong leadership, compassion, and a focus on taking concrete actions to help Canadians. There are, though, still many things that we do not know. But we do know one thing, and that is that together we will get through this challenge. Lorsque le moment sera venu,
when the time comes, we will ensure more longer-term investments to help Canadians to get their daily life back. But what is the most important thing today is that we take care of each other, that we protect the most vulnerable among us, and that we continue to use all the tools available to stabilize our economy. The government will be there with you at every stage.
Only a first step in our plan. When the time is right, we will announce more long-term investments to assist with recovery and help Canadians get back to their daily lives. But what matters most today is that we look after each other, that we protect those who are most vulnerable, and that we continue to use all of the tools we have to stabilize our economy. The government will be there with you every step along the way. Thank you, and I'm happy to take questions from the journalists here.
Hi, everyone. So we will be working blocks of 3 questions. We'll start by 3 questions in the room, then we'll go to the phone and come back. Thank you. Where's your hand up as well? There you go. So I'll just point. Sorry. Let's start here. Oops. Yeah, go ahead. You have them.
Kelsey Johnson with Reuters. Governor Poola's first question to you. The Federal Reserve over the weekend cut by 100 basis points to essentially make their rate 0. Why is the Bank of Canada not matching the Federal Reserve's rate cut at this point?
Well, as is always the case, we have independent monetary policies on the two sides of the border. We were anxious to see the details of the fiscal policy that was just announced for you. We'll be taking those actions fully into account in our estimates of how the economy will fare. I will say that one of the most desirable features of these actions today are that they are what I would call elastic. I hope you don't mind, Minister, if I coin a phrase, but what I think they're designed to do is to expand or not, depending on how large of an impact there is on the economy, how many people are affected. And so that's a very desirable feature, and that's something we need to model in. We're updating our forecasts as we speak. Bank staff are fully engaged. Even though they're working from home, our systems are functioning very well, and 1,500 people are logged on our systems remotely. And so April 15th is our next announcement date. So I'd like to have the full benefit of the analysis, especially, as I said, incorporating the fiscal response into that analysis. And so for now, that's what I'll say about interest rates.
Morneau, you mentioned that EDC is working on specific packages for industries that will be particularly hard hit, like airlines. Can you give a bit more detail as to what that package may look like, how long it may take to get that package in place? Because, as you mentioned, there are significant industries that are in a crisis point at this point.
Let me step to the broader concern we have to support businesses at this time. Obviously, we are concerned that people stay at their jobs as they are able to do that with their employer. And for that reason, we want to make sure that we are supporting companies through this challenging time. The first place we've done that, obviously, has been through providing loan opportunities for small and medium-sized businesses through the Business Credit Availability Program. That's very important. What we're doing today is we're giving temporary wage subsidies to businesses so they can keep people on board. And what we know we need to do in the very immediate time frame is to work with businesses that are in impacted sectors. I've already been working with the businesses in the airline sector, spoke to 2 of the CEOs last evening. We have a team working with businesses in the oil and gas sector. We recognize that ensuring that we bridge these businesses through this difficult time is critically important. That's what we're working towards. We'll have more work to do with these businesses to listen to their challenges and understand how we can create that support as needed. That's coming shortly as we work with them towards that goal.
Thank you. Just for the interest of fairness, let's keep it to one question and one follow-up. Yes.
Je ne vois rien pour des travailleurs autonomes.
I don't see anything for independent workers who might decide to respect the directive and to stay at home, but who don't necessarily have any children, who are not necessarily ill. Is there something in your plan for that? And if not, what do you plan to do about that? Answer. We want to ensure that people who wish to stay home, we want to ensure that they will have the support necessary for that. That means that our emergency support benefit program will be there for them if they wish to, if they must be at home with no source of income. If they're in a situation where they don't have enough money. So there will be this emergency support benefit program that will be there for those people if they must be at home. And the details will be coming up in the next day. Thank you. I've heard that the unemployment rate may reach 20%. Have you done any estimates with regard to what is coming in that regard? Answer. We know that with today's challenges, the challenges in the coming weeks and months, there will be difficulties for many businesses throughout the country, and therefore we need a support that protects people who are in this situation. Today, we cannot put any forecasts in place because the situation is ever changing. That being said, we have an approach, as the governor said, an approach that will be as broad as possible. If there are challenges for people, they will receive the support that they need for them and their families. Thank you.
Minister, I was curious about your Indigenous communities funding. Can you please explain some examples about what that's actually supposed to be used for, what that looks like, and how is it going to be broken down among First Nations, Inuit, and Métis? Is that by number of people in each population, or is that by need?
Well, first of all, let me say that what we're trying to do in this time, we're trying to make sure that the people that are impacted, that are directly impacted by this virus, those who want to stay at home because they need to isolate or we've asked to isolate, or those who lose their jobs have the support that they need. We also recognize that there are groups of Canadians that are particularly vulnerable, and people that are in places that are far away from medical care, people who are in places where food security is a challenge are particularly impacted. We recognize that Indigenous and Northern communities are in that category. We are moving fast in this regard to try and make sure that we've allocated the resources necessary. We recognize that there will be, in cases like supporting Indigenous and Northern communities, there'll be details that we need to continue to work out. We need to recognize that that we don't know all the situations so far, and that we need to prepare ourselves for those eventualities. That's what we're doing in the case of Indigenous peoples, and we're looking forward to working together very rapidly to figure out the details that really constitute your question.
I assume from that answer that you're leaning more towards Indigenous and Northern communities as opposed to urban Indigenous communities. Would that be correct?
I think you should not make any assumptions at this stage. We're going to be very clear and transparent with Canadians about what we know and what we don't know. What we're clear today is that we're providing support for people that we know are impacted. What we're going to continue to do is to support Canadians through a difficult time. And as situations evolve and develop, we will be there for Canadians in all different situations. And that's what we're reflecting today in our approach. And the goal we have is to make sure we have the right resources at the right time for the challenges we're facing. Right now, we're facing a situation where Canadians need to know that they have access to medical care. They need to know they have access to food and the essentials that they require. There'll be a next phase where we might continue to need to support people and make investments to ensure that we can actually come out of this challenge. So there will be more to come.
Thank you. So we'll go over the phone. Juliana?
Certainly. You may now press star 1 to ask your question. The first question is from Bill Curry from the Globe and Mail. Your line is open. Please go ahead.
Hi, Minister. You'd mentioned you're working with the oil and gas sector, and there might be something on orphan wells coming, but what about governments in oil-producing provinces? You've been in talks for several months about fiscal stabilization measures. We know Newfoundland is in particular fiscal problems. So where are you at in terms of action in response to demands from oil-producing provinces?
Well, thank you for the question. We know that there are going to be things emerge through this challenge that are unpredictable. But some things we can see right off. We know that there will be challenges in Alberta because of the significant impact not only of this virus, but also the impact of the oil prices that we're seeing around the world. That will also have impacts on the province of Newfoundland and Labrador, as mentioned. We're going to work through these challenges individually with provinces as they emerge, recognizing that what we want is to come out of this challenge. This is a temporary challenge, a difficult issue for us, but a temporary challenge, one that we need to come out of strong, and that's going to be our approach. So we will work with provinces as they come to us with their issues in a way that is protecting the citizens of each part of our country and ensuring that we have the capacity to move forward once we're through this issue.
Do you have a follow-up, sir?
Yes, the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, their reaction is questioning why the support is at 10% when other countries like Denmark are at 75%. And for the governor, if he could weigh in as well, you mentioned the next rate announcement is April 15. What would it take for you to move before that scheduled announcement?
Let me just address the approach we've taken today. We want to make very sure that people have access to financial resources in a time of real need. We know that people are concerned about having access to enough money for essentials, for medicines, for health care, for any form of food or lodging. These are critically important, and so we focused our approach on having enough money delivered at the right time so people can actually deal with the issues that they are facing. We also know that businesses need some support. So we've taken an approach that allows for significant support for businesses right now through a temporary wage subsidy, and also significant support for businesses as they seek to have credit to make it through a difficult time. We don't take anything off the table. So we are going to continue to consider the emerging evidence of these challenges and respond in a way that meets the goals that we're all trying to achieve, to keep ourselves safe and healthy, to enable us to have our families with the things that they need, and to come out of this strong so that we can revive our economy at the appropriate time.
Thank you. Next person.
Thank you. The next question is from Gloria Galloway from Maze News. Your line is open.
Hello, my question is for Governor Polas. What additional measures is the bank considering to bolster the economy, and is quantitative easing among them?
Well, thank you. And let me just answer Bill's question, Bill Curry's question, just before I turn to yours, because they are contextual. So, I was being fairly careful to not rule out actions at any time. There was nothing scripted about the bank's posture. I only mentioned that between now and April 15th, we'll be doing our usual analysis and producing a monetary policy report. The bank staff are hard on that, and one of the big changes that we've got to incorporate in that is this major fiscal announcement that we've just seen. I'm not going to itemize what could cause us to move earlier or not move earlier at this stage. What I think and blending that with the next question, we've made a lot of moves in just a few days, as I itemized. And just to give you an illustration, I mean, I know it sounds quite theoretical to people. Oh, we have a different repo program or different collateral. Just to illustrate what that might mean, just yesterday, the bank did about just under $35 billion of unusual or let's say quite exceptional transactions, and that's across a wide range of programs, some of which we had never done before. So I'm very proud of the trading room folks that are getting these things done at a time, especially when we've split our operations into 3 different locations for health safety reasons, and everything's functioning terrifically. I'm knocking on wood there. But for example, we did our first purchase in the secondary market of Canada mortgage bonds yesterday. Spreads on Canada mortgage bonds have come down from, in the almost 70 basis points to around 50 basis points. These are on 10 years. That's a really significant move in the markets, and it's an indicator that action is helping to ease tensions out there. And as I said, this is all aimed at keeping credit channels open so that, we out there, businesses and households have lines of credit with banks. And what we want to make sure is that the system functions well so that banks are still in a position to continue to offer that credit to people when they actually need it, which is in a situation like this. So that back plumbing sort of action that we're taking is very important, and some of these things are just getting underway. So I think it's important for us to take some time here to watch those things unfold and see how the market functions. What other tools do we have? Well, they're the same ones that we've laid out in the past under our extraordinary measures. They are all still in the toolkit. But I think the main thing is that most of these things are scaled, that is, are scalable. So we've sort of started out with a certain number of, as I said, for example, $35 billion yesterday. That's a lot for one day worth of transactions. But we will scale that as needed. Whatever the system needs, this is what we will provide. And we'll continue to evolve perhaps elements of the programs to make them more tailored if need be. But for now, we've got a lot in place, and we want to see how it functions. It seems to be functioning well so far.
Follow-up?
I take it that means you're not ruling out quantitative easing.
I would certainly not rule out quantitative easing. Of course not. That is just something that's a standard part of the central bank toolkit. I would say, though, that the things that we are doing right now, that is actively operating in various bond markets, and we're just about to start next week our bankers acceptance program. Well, those things may appear to you as a sort of quantitative easing, but they are not. They are just intended to help markets discover prices more readily. When the bond market is dysfunctional, people can't, they get big bid-ask spreads and the market kind of freezes up. So by doing switches and buybacks, the bank can show itself and show guidance into an equilibrium so we get more rapid turnover in the market. So all those things are going hand in hand to make sure I feel like the plumbing is working well. And that means that the rest of the delivery system that's going on can do its job.
The one before going back to the room.
The next question is from Chris Varco from the Calgary Herald. Your line is open.
Hi, Minister Morneau. I just want to know, what kind of assistance are you looking at for the airlines and for the oil and gas sector? Would this be part of the $10 billion liquidity measures that were announced last week, or would they provide a different kind of assistance? Are you looking at things like loan guarantees, direct investments?
Thank you. We recognize that through the course of this virus, we are going to face different challenges from different sectors, different challenges from different sizes of business. We are not ruling out any conclusion in any situation. We're going to actively work with organizations in the oil and gas sector, in the airline sector, in order to come up with approaches that enable them to bridge through a challenging time. That's critical. We're not far enough along in those discussions to identify specific measures that we will take, but we do recognize the urgency of those discussions and are proceeding with that in mind.
And your follow-up? No. Okay, in that case, we'll be going back to the room. Monsieur Blouin, Radio-Canada.
Monsieur Morneau, je vois rien là-dedans de spécifique pour les aînés.
Is there anything specific for the seniors? For example, would there be any changes to OAS rapidly? What about for seniors who are particularly vulnerable? Thank you. We know that there are challenges for all Canadians across the country. Of course, the challenge is more difficult for people who are in a position where they receive less income because of COVID. We want to ensure that our approach is continuing, so seniors can rest assured that they will keep the income that they're receiving. But we have particular challenges, for example, with the change in market prices. There are difficulties for some seniors, and that is why we have introduced an approach that will help people who want to rest assured that they can continue with their to receive their income in future. So we're trying to monitor the situation. If there is something specific that is required, then we will step up. You've talked about an easing of the rules in order to receive EI benefits. And there are also people who have called for an enhancement of these benefits. Why are you choosing not to go in that direction? Answer. The most important thing immediately is that we have to keep in mind people who are not who do not qualify for EI benefits, even if they are having problems. And that is why we are considering how we can ensure that the $5.7 million of our 19 million workers are going to receive something. That is very important. But we have also done things to help a vast majority of Canadians. Our credit approach with the GST is going to help some $15 million, rather Canadians, and we've also got this enhanced CCC benefit that will help 3.4 million families across Canada. So we have specific measures for a large number of Canadians. And altogether, this is a very comprehensive approach for people who are in situations where they may not be receiving sufficient income. Thank you.
Mr. Morneau, how long is it going to take for Canadians to get money in their pockets?
We've worked hard to make sure that the approaches that we're taking will enable us to move forward as rapidly as possible. This has been a key area of focus. Certainly the Prime Minister has been very engaged in this discussion with me. We've looked at both the systems that we currently have in government, like the employment insurance system, and the systems that we have that can enable us to get money out quickly. It's why we've come to the measures that we've come to, because they enable us to get money out rapidly. So we will be working through the Canada Revenue Agency primarily for the GST credit. That will enable us to get that out fairly rapidly, we believe in April. For the approach, the emergency benefits that we've talked about, those benefits will be able to be out within within a couple to 3 weeks, very rapidly. We're putting up an automatic system so people can go online to the CRA to actually apply with a very, very modest approach to showing that they have the appropriate situation. And that, we think, will enable people to get money in their family finances very rapidly.
And are you concerned about the optics of closing the U.S.-Canadian border to non-essential travel, that it may lead to consumers, panic shopping or, hoarding groceries more or other supplies? How do you combat that? And as well, can the cross-border supply chain, is it resilient enough to maintain that kind of a shock for an extended period of time?
We've been working very hard with the U.S. administration in recent days to make sure we come up with an approach that ensures that we can continue to have the goods and the things that we need, the essential medicines, the food, come back and forth across our border, that our broader supply chains can continue, because we want that to be able to maintain our economy now and to allow us to get back to where we want to get back to once we're past this crisis. I think what we've come to is a very good conclusion, that we will enable non-essential workers and travelers. Those people will not be able to cross the border, but essential workers, people that might be working in Windsor from Detroit, or people working in Detroit that are from Windsor, they will be able to go back and forth if they're in the healthcare sector. We'll be able to ensure that goods and services can come back and forth, because our economies will need that economic travel. But other travel won't be moving back and forth. That was an important discussion between the Prime Minister and the President. We're confident that will give Canadians confidence that we'll continue to have what we need, and we will be continuing to work together in a cooperative way as we try our best to deal with everything as it comes up. And that's the approach we've taken and will continue to take.
Hi, Minister Morneau. Molly Thomas from CTV National News. You said your focus is for Canadians to keep food in the fridge and a roof over their heads. So we know that the banks are deferring mortgage payments. But what about people that don't own a home? What about people that are struggling to pay rent in this time? What are you doing for them?
Well, that's particularly important. We know that there's many different situations for as many different Canadians as exist, and we are trying to ensure that we deal with the most urgent and important right up front, and that's why we've those 5.7 million people who aren't in the employment insurance system. Those people are very important for us to deal with right up. So if they're sick, or if they're quarantined, or if they are laid off or can't work and therefore aren't getting paid, they will have access to funds. The GST low-income credit, which will be providing a significant amount of support for lower-income Canadians. It's a benefit that provides everyone with a family income up to about $56,000 with support. That will help as well. So we are doing our best to make sure that we get the funds to the people who need it most on an urgent basis, and we believe that's the right way to deal with this challenge. And we'll continue to think about other methods to get money to people, but we believe these are the fastest way to get the appropriate amount of funds to the people who are most in need.
Financial bind was 2008, obviously. Are we looking at a worse financial quarter to come then after that? And maybe Governor Polas can also weigh in on that.
I think it's important that we tell Canadians what we know and what we don't know. We can't know the full impact or the duration of the challenge we're facing. We do know that we have one of the strongest, if not the strongest, healthcare system in the world to deal with this crisis. We do know that we actually have perhaps the best banking system in the world to make sure that businesses can still get credit. We have a very strong fiscal position that we're willing to use. So we know that we've got the tools to deal with this. We also know that we have a strong and well-educated workforce to come out of this when the time comes. And we'll support people along the way to get there. As we know more, we will be telling Canadians exactly what we know, and we will be supporting them with measures that are appropriate to the challenges that we come up against. That's what we're trying to do today, and we'll continue with that approach.
So, sorry. I think the minister said, well, we honestly don't know what's coming our way. Fact is, back then, we didn't know what was coming our way either. But I would say that one thing you mentioned, which is worth emphasizing, that is, we actually do have the best banking system in the world. And it is indeed vastly strengthened compared to 12 years ago because of new global standards and I think also lessons that were learned during that period. And those lessons were learned not just by the lenders, but they were learned by the policymakers. So personally, I have great comfort from the seasoned people who I've got around me who were living through that. At the time, I was making loans at EDC. But for example, Carolyn Wilkins was in the trench developing new capital arrangements, new collateral arrangements, new lines to help the situation under Governor Carney. And there she is today doing exactly the same thing behind the scenes. That sort of thing gives me a lot of confidence that, in fact, we are in a better position today in the financial system. And we're ahead in terms of the deployment of those tools compared to back in 2008. Again, I put that up against we don't actually know what's coming our way, of course, but I think we've got the ability to be nimble and adaptable to it. And this fiscal package is going to make a really big difference to the way you envision how that would play out. So I think the other thing we want to prepare for the other side. We know that this is a temporary thing. We don't know how long or how big, but it's temporary. And I know we entered this at a time when the economy was in the best place it had been for a really long time, with unemployment at historic lows and inflation on target and so on. Those are in a strong fiscal position. So all those things make a really big difference to how we will recover afterwards. So I think we can certainly look forward to a robust recovery when the trouble's behind us.
So we'll go back to the phone, but in the interest of time, we'll only take 2 questions on the phone and then 2 questions in the audience. Juliana?
Certainly. The next question is from Kim McCrail from the Wall Street Journal. Your line is open.
Hi, thanks. This question is for Governor Polas. Governor, I'm wondering if you could describe how Governing Council is communicating at this stage, if things have changed in terms of whether you're meeting in person, your communications have moved to a different format, and how often you're meeting, and when the last meeting was.
Okay, well, we're in pretty constant touch. We met yesterday. We met though mostly virtually. For certain, Senior Deputy Governor Wilkins and I are maintaining our distance. Should either one of us become ill, that we don't affect the other. One of our deputy governors went home and stayed home last week, and a second one who lives in Vancouver is staying home. So we're completely. There's only at most a couple of deputy governors in the building at any one time, and the building's mostly empty except for the operational staff I mentioned before. Anyway. So we're meeting more or less continuously. It was like both on virtual. The Skyping is working extraordinarily well. My compliments to Bell Canada. I was on the phone all day yesterday, and only once did I fail to get a call through. Went to my landline and it worked right away. And so the system must be taking a terrific amount of traffic in this situation. And so all that to say, we're in constant touch, and we're also in very frequent touch with our G7 colleagues. And we're meeting twice a week with the big 6 CEOs of the large banks to get a feel for that. And of course, our market intelligence people are in constant contact with the street, and our operational people are in the market every minute. And so we're getting a constant play-by-play globally and domestically. It's, I would say, in that sense, operationally, it's working extraordinarily well. So let's just look forward, as I said before, to how all these things we're doing that are different from before, how they play out. Fundamentally, it's about our financial system having access to funding and being able to continue to get things working out through the system. People need it, they get it. Thank you.
Thanks. And can I ask, during your discussions, the discussions Governing Council held yesterday, did you discuss the possibility of a rate cut today?
I don't want to front run our discussions at this stage it's like a continuous dialogue. It's not like we're saying, well, let's talk about this on Friday or on Monday or that sort of thing. We're just talking continuously. We're developing these new tools. We're commenting to one another. What have we forgotten? What haven't we done? So that right now, we'll be in touch all the time, and we'll be able to say conditions have changed enough that we perhaps should have a conversation about this. I won't need to organize a formal meeting. Everybody's available. For one thing, nobody's traveling anywhere, so it is actually more available than usual. That's it.
Thank you. Next question.
The next question is from Catherine Lévesque de la Presse canadienne. Votre ligne est ouverte.
Oui, bonjour. J'avais une question pour Monsieur
Good afternoon. I have a question for Minister Morneau. If we look at the detail of the emergency care benefit, people have to prove every 2 weeks that they're still eligible. So I was wondering why are you considering easing those options? Because some people may have difficulty contacting CRA. So perhaps some emergency aid should be dispensed. Thank you very much. We wish to have an approach that works very nimbly. We think that we have found the right approach, which means that there will be a very short attestation to ensure that the person in question is indeed in a situation where they require income, and then we will have an automatic with the CRA. There will be an automatic payment so that they can receive the payment immediately. So this is an approach that we think will work. If there are challenges, because, well, it's the first time we've used such an approach, we will rectify it as soon as possible. And so we will be there for Canadians. We will be there as quickly as possible with the tools required. Thank you. Thank you. My follow-up question is, well, most of the measures announced today are direct support. This will require adoption by Parliament and royal assent. What is going to happen to ensure that this is going to happen as quickly as possible? What is your message? Answer. I'd like to tell the other political parties, I'd like to say that they are working very closely with the government. And we have received a number of recommendations. And in my opinion, we all realize that we need an approach that is going to be in place as quickly as possible. And in my opinion, we will be back to Parliament very, very quickly. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we are coming back to the room, sir.
Governor, can I ask you, I'm just looking for a figure on purchase of bankers' acceptance notes, municipal and corporate bonds. What's the ceiling?
We have not laid out our parameters around that yet, but it'll be judged according to need. Okay, well, our objective will be market functioning, and so if the market needs only a small amount of activity from us to function well, then it'll be a small amount. But And we'll start off with, I think pretty large numbers, and it's more a question of what take up there is. It's like a reverse auction. So you put out, you say, well, we're willing to take up to this much, and see what the response is. So it's more like, what does the market require in order to get through its business week? So that's to begin next week, and I hesitate to use the extreme words around this, but just say, like, all of these things we've done around repos and other forms of lending or involvement in the actual secondary markets, we can scale those up as much as needed. Okay, so there's all kinds of capacity to make them as big as seems to be needed at the time. So we don't have to worry about, people are asking, is there more you can do? Well, yeah, you can do everything much bigger one week and not as big the next. It just depends on what the market requires.
And Minister, you've been told by CFIB that businesses will be failing, but the carbon tax goes up at the start of the fiscal year. You've been told by CFIB that people will lose their jobs, but MPs will be getting a cost of living increase on April 1st. Carbon tax, cost of living increase, will you defer those or repeal them on April 1st to set an example?
I think it's important to note that we've been working together with the other parties. I've asked the President of the Canadian Labour Congress and the President of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce are both here with us today. We've been working together with Labour and with business to work on an approach that's going to deliver the support that Canadians need right now. And by that, I mean the support that people need to deal with this immediate challenge. So we've had recommendations from both the Canadian Labour Congress and the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, Canadian Chamber on approaches we can take to deal with both how we support people and how we support businesses through a very challenging time. We've embraced the approaches that they've recommended because we've seen them as being very sensible approaches, things that we could implement rapidly. We've also taken and embraced the approaches proposed by the other parties. I think there's been a good level of collaboration and understanding that we need to deal with the challenges in the immediate term that are right here in front of us, and we need to ensure that we get to the challenges that will be the next set of challenges when those present themselves. That's why I'm pleased with where we've gotten to, but we'll have to acknowledge that we will remain open to considering what the next steps should be based on how the situation evolves. Our approach, as the governor mentioned, is elastic. If we find that we have more people with challenges, we are taking the measures that mean that people can have access to money irrespective of how long that goes, because we're going to have to reconsider the information as it comes out. And that's going to be quite important for dealing with this challenge. I want Canadians to know that we will continue to support them, that in a challenging time, the government will be there for them.
Thank you. And for our last question, Madame Lamarche-Tevilla.
D'abord, pour vous, vous dites qu'il reste beaucoup de travail législatif à faire.
You are saying that there is a great deal of legislative work that remains before being able to put all of these measures in place. You're talking about 3 weeks for the emergency care benefit. Are you confident that you can do that in 3 weeks? And for the other measures, how long will they take? Answer. We have already begun our approach with regard to administration, which means that over past weeks we've been working to ensure that we have the facility, the capacity to pay the money out to people, and that is very important. We have to have the legislation, obviously. That must be adopted, and that's why it's important to work with other parties. And in my opinion, we'll be in a very good position to do so in coming days. So we have an approach. We have the possibility of taking robust measures, and we're going to be very transparent with Canadians to ensure every day to monitor where we're at and to ensure that Canadians can have the trust, can trust us to receive the income that they require to meet their needs. Question inaudible for the interpreter. Answer, well, if we can do it before 3 weeks, we will do so. If we need to take the full 3 weeks, we will. But please rest assured that we're working every single day to find ways of administering what we're doing as possible. How do you evaluate the costs of ensuring the changes at the border? For example, will supply chains continue to work? How much is it going to cost all of these complications at the border, at the U.S. border? Because obviously there will be problems. Answer, our approach concerning the U.S. border is to ensure that we make Canadians' health a priority and to ensure that our healthcare system works. I think that we found the right approach. We're going to continue with essential circulation, but we're going to tell Canadians and Americans that they must stay at home except in cases of non-essential travel. With regard to our economy, our approach is that we want to continue free trade between ourselves and the United States. We cannot be sure right at the moment of what will happen in the future because things are changing every day. But we do have an agreement with the Americans that will ensure that we can continue to engage in free trade, which is very important for our economy. Thank you.
We believe that what we've come up with the Americans is the appropriate approach. We've said that we don't want to have non-essential travel back and forth. So consistent with both countries, we've asked people to stay at home if they can stay at home if they're not essential workers. That said, we'll allow essential workers to go back and forth. We'll allow for commerce to continue because we know that getting medicine, getting food back and forth across the border is critically important for both countries. And so we've taken a practical approach that will protect us and ensure that we continue to be able to have a functioning economy during this challenging time. So with that, I'd like to thank all of you and just to say that what we've tried to do today is to ensure that Canadians have confidence, that we are going to protect them and their families, not only their health, but their ability to afford the things that they need at the time they need it. This is a first phase. It's a very significant phase of helping people directly, of helping businesses to bridge a difficult time. But there will be more work to do as we have more information. I've been particularly pleased with the cooperation of the other parties. It is clear that we all see the importance of working together to support Canadians, and I'm confident that we'll continue to be able to work together in that regard. I've been particularly pleased to see the Canadian Labour Congress and the Canadian Chambers of Commerce to work together to come up with ideas that are supporting Canadians, supporting Canadian businesses so they can support people. This is the sort of thing that we have in Canada that is so that we're so fortunate to have. We will continue to take care of Canadians. We ask that people take care of themselves, and the government will be there to support them as we move forward in these challenging times. So, merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much for having been here today.
We'll look forward to continuing to keep you up to date as the situation evolves. Thank you, Governor.
All right, that is a very long press conference by the Finance Minister and the Governor of the Bank of Canada. No complaints, though. It was lots of important information there. One of the central pieces of information is that this injection of cash that will be coming directly to your pockets soon and a freeing up of liquidity is only the first step, is what the Finance Minister said, in terms of long-term investments to help with the economy